So tell me, I can't recall, were you drafted or did you join?
I volunteered. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go to college for several reasons. Back then, you have to have pretty high ACT and SAT scores, and mine were not. And didn't have the money anyway. And then my draft number was between 2 and 10, so I knew I was going to be drafted, so I joined. My dad was a career Navy veteran. He was a naval corpsman in World War II, starting in May 42, and he got out sometimes in 46.
So was he in World War II then?
He was a Navy corpsman with the Marine Corps in World War II and landed on several islands.
Wow.
And he was out for 3 years, then went back in. And he was a Navy veteran for 25 years. They told him this rotation came that he had to go to Vietnam, and he told them nope. He had 2 wars, World War II and Korea. Vietnam wasn't his war, and he didn't really want to have anything to do with it. It ended up being my war.
Okay, but he was Navy, and then you joined a different branch.
I joined the Army, my brother joined the Army, and my sister joined the Army.
Wow.
Well, ship blows up, sinks. At least somebody's dropping bombs. I can dig a hole and get in it. But I just went in the Army.
Okay.
I wanted to be a paratrooper in Special Forces. Special Forces training, I got hurt pretty bad with a parachute malfunction, didn't open properly, and got tangled up in those trees, and it pulled my vertebrae in the lower back, and I limp for about a year and a half, my left leg, whatever. And next thing I know, I got more orders to go to Vietnam. I had a profile. But I couldn't take care of the problem until I got to Fort Lewis. Got to Fort Lewis, Washington. I said, well, I got this profile. Well, you got to take care of that when you get to Cameron Bay. So I get to Cameron Bay, and I said, I got this profile. And they said, okay, we'll make you a clerk or truck driver somewhere. I said, okay. Next thing I know, I'm on a chopper to Cameron Bay. Or not a chopper, it was a C-124 to Cameron Bay. Quin Yon. And there got processed or what have you, and then I was shipped to LZ Uplift. And while the first sergeant was doing the paperwork, the company was out and they got hit. And there were 6 of us that came in. And so they loaded us up, and out in the boonies I went, and that's where I stayed, even with a profile with a back injury.
Wow.
And even got injured more.
So you're out there, tell me what the boonies were like. Describe that place.
Hot, miserable, temperatures 120, humidity anywhere from 90, 100%, always sweating. Always have to take salt tablets, have to drink as much water as you possibly can get. And it was just hot and miserable. But it was pretty country too, you know. I'd never seen rice paddies before. I learned real quick what they were. I never seen what do they call those big ox they had out there, you know, they pull those plows, what have you. And I never really seen Oriental people except Navy bases where we were stationed at. You know, you've seen some Koreans and some Japanese American citizens that were in the military, but these were completely different type of people, and they lived like they lived back in the 14th century, you know. No communications, no telephones. They live in grass huts and what have you, and they just used the bathroom wherever they had to use it, I guess, like we seen them do so many times. And it was just a completely different animal altogether, what you was used to, you know.
So.
But we kind of, at Fort Lewis when we went over there, we were told first off by a lot of the officers that was briefing us what to expect over there, the humidity and the people, the culture, and the problems that were prevailing, that our Pacific assignment was not necessarily like people think to win a war. It was basically to secure South Vietnam from the insurgencies, which were the Viet Cong, until they completely were decimated in the Tet Offensive, and then North Vietnam got involved then. and basically we got involved big time then. But it was basically we were ordered to secure South Vietnam so the South Vietnamese people can decide how they wanted to live their lives, what type of government. If they wanted to go communist, fine. Go communist, we'd get out. But a lot of people don't understand that. That was the mission. It never was to invade North Vietnam, Cambodia, or whatever. You know, it was just to secure the South so they could decide what they wanted to do.
So how did you get along with the people?
Never had much interaction with the people. The villages we'd go through during the daytime, they treated you fine. They shared their food, and if they had any beer or whatever, they shared it with you. We shared our candy bars with the kids and stuff like this, but then at night you knew some of them were going to put on those black pajamas and come looking for you. So we go about a click and a half down the trail, whatever, and we just set up an ambush, wait for them. See if they come. Sure enough, here they come. Or some of them would come anyway, you know. And you could always tell in all those villages, there's always a Viet Cong someplace. You know, you can tell that when you walk in, the atmosphere would change. And you can tell, you know, that they were being controlled and that there was at least one or two Viet Cong insurgents there watching how the people were reacting to us, things of this nature.
You said the atmosphere would change. What did it feel like?
Well, you know, we would see the village. A lot of times we knew where certain villages were at. And we knew which villages had been friendly to us before. But when you come into a village and all of a sudden, you know, people are going about their business, and all of a sudden they stiffen up, they do one of these numbers, you know, eyeballs, and they're looking around, not at us, but at their own people, whatever. And then you knew something was up. You knew Viet Cong were in the village or in the area, had been there, threatened them or whatever, or was there threatening them right now.
Yeah.
You know, seeing this common things of this nature.
You could tell that some people there were under duress then.
Oh yeah, you knew it right off the bat. See, we go into villages sometimes that were friendly to us, and half the village would be killed and what have you. We've seen them at times where they've taken pregnant women and hang them up by the wrist and slit their bellies open, and the unborn child just dangling by those umbilical cords. And this is how they treated them, kept them in line. And regardless what anybody says about the communists, especially the Oriental communists, they were not very forgiving or very kind to their own people. In fact, they just used them as cannon fodder. You know, even a North Vietnamese major we captured even admitted that effect. You know, they drafted a lot of their own people to fight in the war, women and children and young men, and they just used them as cannon fodder. You know, if we lost 58,000 people, I had one major tell me they already lost over 1 million people. You know, just a conflict or whatever. Knew they couldn't beat us, but they knew several things that a lot of us young boys didn't know.
Like what?
Well, they knew that the American people were used to having wars won in 4 years, or at least in 2 hours, like on John Wayne movie. That was kind of surprising to me. And he said, American people don't like large body counts. They're used to it. You know, human life didn't mean anything to them. And number 3, they knew we'd wait long enough, we'd have to leave. We'd already been there pretty close to 10 years. I was back in 1971 when I was there. And he also said that, and your American politicians are crooked. I like that. Well, you're not telling me nothing new there. You know, I said, what do you mean, crooked? He said, you ever wonder why the Democrats wouldn't let the Republicans or Nixon them declare war? I never thought about it. But I've thought about it over the last 45 years since then.
And what have you concluded?
Real simple. If you declared a war, it's just like World War II. You destroyed the military, the enemy military, like we did in World War II. Then you destroy the infrastructure. If they're still fighting, then you got to destroy the people, will the fight to support the government. We were not permitted to do certain things. The Air Force and Navy were only permitted to destroy certain targets. Kind of weird, that I found out years later. The North Vietnamese would say, here's our target you can hit, and our Congress would tell the Navy and the Air Force, you have to hit those targets. Well, there was nothing there. you know. And I found that out years later. Sure enough, yeah, that's what some of the Air Force and Navy pilots told me. Oh yeah, hit the same target over and over, nothing there.
And why do you think they were doing that?
Crooked politicians, I think. Our political agenda. At that time, I was a registered Democrat, but I'm a conservative Democrat. At that time, the Democratic Party was being controlled or taken over by, well, radicals, left wings. I like to call them now the socialist, communist, progressive, liberal Democrats.
Wow.
They left the conservatives out, you know, and so, and I think that, you know, it was just an agenda, because the peace treaty, if you look at it, 'cause I had to do a paper on it in college. I had a college professor in, let's see, what was it? Social science. He said the world can change with the action of one person. And of course, Hitler proved that, Stalin proved that, Mao in China proved that, and Castro has proved that, what have you. And then he come up and said, if anybody in here could prove that the American Army was not defeated, I'll give you B in the class, you won't have to show up. Well, this was 75, I was at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, getting a degree in criminal justice. And I'd already seen that on TV in April 2nd, after Nixon resigned. The Democrats won the House and the Senate. All those protesters got elected. Well, it's payback time. Now, a lot of people, my generation and after, don't understand that the peace treaty that even the Russians and the Chinese made the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong sign to end the war to themselves, stated that if South Vietnam had to expend a bullet, lost a rifle, tank, plane, or what have you, we would supply it one for one. And I think there was a provision in there that their full-scale invasion, we would come back. All right. Well, when Nixon resigned because of what he did, and the Democrats took control, Fulbright and them cut the money off. In April '75, I think it was April 5th, Ford went to the full joint House and Senate and begged them on national TV to honor the peace treaty, to release the funds and the equipment. And all the Democrats, except for a few, walked out. And Fulbright made the statement on national TV, and I'll never forget this, that he didn't give a damn about South Vietnam. It can go communist, no more than Arkansas losing to Texas in a football game. Well, April 25th or 27th, Saigon fell. Because right there in Cambodia, where in the Delta, where a lot of the Ho Chi Minh trails in, they had 15 divisions. And they had a company of T-34 tanks. And from that section there to Saigon is only about 150 miles. And it didn't take long for 15 divisions to go there and take it. And it was over. Regardless what the South Vietnamese Army was doing in the central section, what have you, once the cap and the government fell, it was over. So basically, to me, to this day, the Democrats gave that war away, especially Fulbright and them when they walked out. American soldier didn't lose the battle. We did what we was told to do, to run the insurgents out, so South Vietnam could decide how they wanted to run their own country. And you know it was that way because we had to go into Cambodia illegally to take the fight to them because they was building up their mass army. We knew it. We saw it. You know, you can't help but see the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and you see divisions after division of troops and tanks coming down that trail. They weren't going to honor anything, you know, but that's the way it was. And ever since then, American people, especially the government, won't let the U.S. Army win any war ever again. It's just one skirmish after another, I assume, for the rest of our lives. That's my take on it anyway.
Okay, very interesting.
Now you can cut all that out later and edit it.
No, that was interesting. So you're how old when you were sent to those jungles? when you arrived?
I joined the Army at 19, right after high school, 10 days after high school. I joined up in January, called the Delay Entry Program. And when I got to basic training, I was always considered an E2. I had one stripe. And so then I went to basic training, and then I went to jump school, then special forces training. When I got to NOM, even with that profile, I was, let's see, 20 years of age. But no, 21 years of age, 21. And I was the old man. I was the oldest one in my platoon. The youngest one in the platoon, he was about 17, but he no speaking the English. He was what we considered back then a wetback, okay? He got caught. And back then, the examining judge would come by, or whatever judge it was, and have this hearing, and tell me, we're going to send you back. You've been in the county jail now for 6 months. We're going to send you back, or you can join the Army. So he joined the Army. Stay in the Army 5 years, you meet that requirement, become a U.S. citizen. And then the government told him, says, well, you go to Vietnam and survive, you'll be an instant citizen. So here he comes. Him and a few others like that. Hardly spoke any English, but they were pretty good fighters. They obeyed orders. They knew enough, what have you. And when I got there, it was after what the officers told us at Fort Lewis. Don't get our expectations up high and what have you about winning any conflict, because it wasn't that type of war. Well, you can tell they were political officers already. We got to Cameron Bay, and this colonel lined all 600 of us up. And he said, look to your right, your left, front, and back. You're fighting for each other. You're not fighting for God, country, or for home, or what have you. You're fighting for each other. And bring back as many of your buddies as you possibly can. This is what you're fighting for. And I remember this colonel telling us that he said, Tip O'Neill, Messenblom, Brown, and Ted Kennedy are not going to let you win any conflict or war. They've already decided that.
You said go ahead.
That was a eye-opener for a lot of us young boys and what have you. Their own government would do that, and these officers would say that. But apparently they come to the realization that this was a political mess, and there was no way out of it except just run its course.
So you're 21, one of the older, and your assignment is to bring back as many of your buddies as you can.
Well, that's what he said at Cameron Bay. But of course, once I got there, the uplift and what have you was something different. It was kind of unusual, but every 15, 20 days was different lieutenant running the platoon or what have you. And I never knew who the captain was, because they came and went. First sergeants came and went, because they were trying to rotate as many of these young officers out of this OCS school, because you had to be in combat for 30 days or longer to get that CIB badge. And if you was going to be a career Army officer, especially infantry-wise or what have you, to become a general or command staff, you had to have that CIB. So they'd be running.
CIB means what?
That's that blue badge on your shoulder up here. It's got that rifle and that reef around it. It's a combat infantry badge. Okay? And you had to be in country in a combat zone situation for 30 days in order to get that CIB badge in. And they were running all these non-coms and officers and second lieutenants, first lieutenants through there as fast as they could before we finally left the country, I guess, to get them that badge, that experience, so they can move up in their career in the military if they chose to stay in. So I hardly ever knew who the lieutenant was or whatever. Most of the time we didn't have one. Just went out in the field by ourselves.
Wow. So you've said uplift a few times. What was that?
LZ uplift. LZ stands for landing zone, paratrooper lingo. Just like in World War II, market guard and things of this nature. They call it LZ landing zone. LZ uplift, and they call the base uplift. Now that was a primary base. It was on Highway 1 in Central Highland.
What was the name of the base again?
LZ uplift.
Okay.
UPLAFT.
Okay.
Just like it sounds.
Okay.
Don't ask me why they chose the name Uplift, but they did. And that's basically where the 1st and 2nd Battalion of the 173rd Airborne Brigade was stationed. And I think the 2nd Battalion was at LZ English, about 50, 60 miles north of us on Highway 1. We were close to the community called Bonsang, and we were about 50, 60 miles north of Phuket Air Force Base and about 100 miles north of Quy Nhon. But mainly my platoon and a couple other platoons from the 1st Battalion operated out of, Dak To. In 1970, before I got there, there was a humongous battle there at Dak To involving the 173rd or what have you. Well, there was still an air base there, and then about 10 miles further towards the Cambodian border, there was a couple of fire bases there. Now, we call that fire base LZ Uplift A. I do not know what the artillery people called it, and I do not know what I think it was the 25th Division, or it might have been the 1st Cav Infantry that was responsible for guarding the base, what they called it. But we call it LZ Uplift A because we weren't supposed to be there. It was an unofficial base, but it was still in South Vietnam. We were 2 miles from Cambodia and about 10 miles from Laos. So you can probably guess where most of our operations were at,
Wow.
even though we weren't there.
Even though you weren't there. That's declassified now, isn't it?
No,
It's not still?
no. In fact, when I came back from Vietnam, we were threatened with Leavenworth if we ever divulged the information where we were actually fighting at. Of course, I told them, what are you going to do, send us to Leavenworth, so what? Worst you could do is send us back to Vietnam. Already been there, done that. Said a little nice choice words we did to the commanding officer of the base, whatever. And he said, I'm just telling you what they told me to tell you. I guess a lot of that had to happen because of the restrictions they put on us or what have you. And if you're receiving fire from inside those countries, don't tell me we can't go after them to protect ourselves, what have you. People out of your mind. They give us restrictions. You can't fire on religious temples, even though the Viet Cong North Vietnamese were using those as their base to fire upon it because they knew those restrictions. Well, who gave us those restrictions? Well, Congress did. And who was controlling the Congress at the time? Same people I could care less about today, Democrats. But anyway, well, those people giving us the instruction, well, they were 10,000 miles back home. And the officers telling us, the command officers, well, they were 100 miles behind us. They weren't there. So we pretty well just ignored it. You fire on us, we're taking it out. And they loved, especially NVA, they loved using civilians as shields. But we had to do what we had to do. You know, my orders were, my instructions were that I remembered from that colonel at Quy Nhon, or Cam Ranh Bay, bring back each other.
How hard was that to do?
It was hard to shoot through the shield of civilians at times, but when you see your guys were dropping, getting wounded, what have you, you just had to do it. And it just had to be done. And sometimes they use children, boys especially, come up to shine your boots and what have you, and then they self-detonate and kill themselves and kill the troopers. When you see stuff like that, and you tell what's going on, you have to take out the children too. You know, you try not to think about it. Now ask me if I ever put it out of my mind. No, I didn't. And it tears me up every time I think about it. I see young children today. You hear about car accidents. I was a police officer for years. And it always tore me up when I had to go to autopsies for children because I'd have those flashbacks. Those young children never got to grow up like this young child that was inadvertently killed for whatever reason, what have you. You know, things like that jars your memory stuff.
Mm-hmm. What about casualties? You're on your side. How big
They
was
just
that?
kept mounting up. on their side and our side. It was just a useless killing field. You know, the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong threw away their people almost as easily as our government threw us away.
Is that what you feel like?
I feel like I was betrayed, not only by my government, what have you, but by the citizens of my country. You know, the protesters was only 1% of 1% of the people. And they weren't college students. That's when the term rent-a-mob came in. That's basically what they were. They just followed most of their communist-led professors or whatever, if you can call them professors, and they protested. Well, my question I always have from my parents, my fiance, and all my friends, where the hell were you? Why weren't you protesting against them and making our government honor their commitment to us and let us do our job, or at least support us?
What
You know,
did they answer?
They didn't have any answer. Well, we were supporting you. We wrote you letters, this and that. Yeah, fine. I said, but protesters write me a letter too, hoping I'd die. You know, they find out who your name and what have you, and they had assembly line. They'd be writing these letters to all these GIs. Hope you get killed, hope you get tortured. If you become a prisoner, you're never going to come home. You know, Jane Fonda said they can kill you and all that kind of crap. And not all that crap comes to me. You just went on and burned that letter.
They just found your name and sent those kind
Well,
of
it
letters
wasn't hard to
you?
get.
Yeah.
I mean, government plastered all over it. I guess it was easy enough to get, so they got it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know where they got the name, but I can imagine where they got the name.
What'd you think the first time you opened up one of those?
Well, we knew what it was. We were warned that we'd probably get some of these letters and what have you. And the officers told us, the commanding officer told us that it wasn't difficult for the Russian intelligence, KGB or whatever, to get the names of the list or whatever, especially when the 173rd was there. They knew it was there, the 4th Division, the 1st Marine Division, 101st, whatever. Well, they pretty well know who those people were. You know, it's kind of broadcast anyway. You go to any military base, you can probably get the names. And it wouldn't be difficult for them to get it. And they just sit there like an assembly line and write those letters, hate letters and everything else, and you'd get them addressed. Sometimes I'll look at a girl's name on it. Who is this, you know? Open it up, and that's what it'd be. I only got a few like that, you know.
Were you mad, or were you?
Nah, you know, when you got a chance to read a newspaper, of course, most of the newspapers were 3 weeks to 3 months old or whatever. You can still see the protests and everything going on. You could see the handwriting on the wall, and you knew what was going on. They just ignored it. I just put there a bunch of stupid, ignorant people, and now some of them are running this country.
What did you think about the news media at the time? Because, I mean, the war was covered in an entirely different way than other wars have been.
One of the biggest mistakes, you know, in World War II, the Marines did not let news media be in the Pacific. But they sure all over Europe, weren't they? You ever wondered why they weren't allowed in the Pacific? The Japanese Code of Conduct was the reasons why. Those Marines had to go in there and kill them all because their code was not to surrender, was dishonorable. If a Japanese soldier surrendered, he was considered dead to his country because he dishonored the emperor, the sun god on earth to them at the time. And their families would be dishonored and they become homeless. They would be non-people. So they could not surrender. A lot of them did towards the end, but then the early part they could not. So the orders with Marines or what have you, the Army personnel, you had to kill them all because they just would not surrender. And of course, in Okinawa, my dad would tell me in Iwo Jima where he was at, you could hear the explosions in the cave. They would detonate the grenades in their bodies, kill themselves instead of surrendering. Because it was more honorable for death for the emperor than it was to surrender. All right? So you didn't have it, but in Europe it was different. In Vietnam and Korea, I don't know much about the news media, but man, they were all over Vietnam. From every country in the world, all over Vietnam, except basically where we were at. We did have one come with us, a smart mouth young lady, for, I think it was the UPI or something like back then. And we just simply told her, you're on your own. Where we're going is a hot zone, and I'm not going to assign anybody to protect you. You are on your own, young lady. She took it. Never saw her again. We got in the boonies, disappeared. I don't know what happened to her. I was about to expend a man to assign to protect her because those idiots jump up and take pictures thinking well, I'm a news reporter. I got this press thing. The enemy's not going to shoot me or whatever. Well, bullets and grenades don't know who you are. And a lot of those young North Vietnamese soldiers, 16, 17 years old, get that automatic weapon, a little bit of training. All they knew how to do is put that thing on full automatic and just spray the area. And they're not going to be too concerned about a Red Cross for a medic, because our medics took them off. And they're not going to be too concerned about a female out there taking pictures. You know, their object was to kill Americans. And I looked at it and said, you're an American. We don't know what happened to her, not even to this day.
So she just disappeared out there? Or?
Disappeared, never did find her body after the battle was over. I don't know if maybe she just decided to step on over to the North Vietnamese side, or maybe they captured her or whatever and found out she was a news reporter and released her or whatever. I never did find out. Didn't know her name, didn't really care. I mean, it's a combat situation. The idiot going out there with a camera, you're on your own, you know. You know, the captain looked at you, well, you got to protect this person, and he looked at you and rolled his eyes. I'm saying, no, you know, you're not carrying a weapon, you're on your own. You know, you're not supposed to be there, you shouldn't be there. All you do is hinder me and my job if I got to protect you. And you just couldn't do it. You know, I just wasn't going to expend somebody just to protect an idiot.
What was the most dangerous time?
When wasn't it? It was the uplift, supposed to be in a safe area, because that Central Highland was pretty well supposed to have been under control. But you could see that the Vietnamese would come in and work the barber shops, the garbage detail, the laundry, and things of this nature. And sometimes you can sit there and you'd watch them, and you see how someone walk kind of funny. And they'd be going from one place to a hut where the captain hut's over there, the officers over there, mess hall's over there, the ammo dump's right there, and you see them pace off. Well, you knew what was happening. You know, they're pacing off for the mortars in the hills. They knew he was going to get hit. Well, you end up catching them, what have you. If everyone you caught, too, got away with information. Sure enough, here it comes. Now, even that wasn't a safe place, what have you. On the LZ Uplift A, at that fire base just outside of Dak To, it was not uncommon to have to call in air support almost every other night. They would hit it hard. They'd come across the border of Cambodia and hit the place, you know. There was a couple thousand NVA troops or whatever, then they'd run back across thinking you can't chase them, not supposed to. Well, bull crap of that. Next day we're going after you, you know. Cambodia or not. You know, stop this stuff, especially those big 55 millimeter 105 mortars coming in at you. You know, then them suckers hurt. You know, they get close enough, the concussion's enough to throw you in the air 10, 12 feet and throw you around, cause your blood vessels to burst, blood coming out of your eyes, nose, ears, and what have you, concussion, what have you. I never could explain it to my wife or what have you, but with all that concussion and stuff, until we saw that Saving Private Ryan, you know, that opening beach scene, you know, where the explosion goes off and you just fogged there. I said, that's it. I said, that's what I've been trying to explain how it was. When those concussions and grenades and mortars would go off and you get caught in that zone right there where the shrapnel didn't kill you or nothing, but it sure messed up your brain and stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, and just like a fog.
Were you injured?
Yes. I was injured several times. A mortar went off and I got peppered from my face, chest, and what have you. At times, if I take my shirt off in the summertime and I get a little red, you can see the white spots all over me where it was just peppered in, and the doctor just said, just leave it in. You know, just too much to take out, and a lot of times it would come out. I'd be in the shower, what have you, and it just like when I come back from the war, just like I was bleeding. It's just the rust coming out. Not quite as bad now. In fact, I haven't had any of that in the past 15, 20 years. And I got impaled in the chest with a big 5-inch piece. I had a habit of wearing a bandolier. You know what a bandolier is? Mm-hmm. Okay. And back then, the magazine holds 20 rounds, and you had 6. And I'd had one run this way, but I always had a habit after I'd emptied it, I'd put the empty one back in. Because you never know when you're going to get another bandolier. Sometimes they send you boxes of ammo for the M16, but they'd be loose, and you'd have to put them in. Well, if you just throw them on the ground, you didn't have any more magazines. So I always put the empty one in. I had one over my heart with the 55 millimeter round mortar went off, and it was such enough to concussion when I finally come to and what have you, had a 5-inch piece sticking out through there and embedded into my chest close to the heart. Well, all the medic did was just wrapped it up, and when they got me back to the aid station, which was a portable mass unit that was about 1 mile behind the fighting, and we was in South Vietnam at the time, close to the border. And I remember the doctor took an x-ray of it, and he saw it was just pretty close to the heart, and he grabbed a pair of pliers and he just yanked the thing out.
Oh.
And then he just didn't really stitch it. He put some type of effect like a glue, and he put the bandage over it and everything else. And he said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Sore." He said, "You're going to be sore for a couple of days, but get your equipment, you can go back to the field." But I didn't. He sent me back to the hospital, and then we went home.
Okay.
All of us from there went home, and after we got out of the hospital at Quin Yon, we were going back to the field. We got met by an officer from the AG. Said, "You 6 men are going home." Well, some of the guys still had 6 months to go, 8 months to go, stuff like that. Said, "No, you're going home. Your unit's been disbanded. You're going home." I said, "Okay." So we get to Cameron Bay. They put us on a plane. We get to Fort Lewis, and that's when we were processed. Got in 9 o'clock at night to the plane at Seattle, Washington there when it come into the airport. All the way down at the end of the tarmac down there, and have all those deuce and a half, and everybody got on that because all the protesters were out front. And we go out the back gate, whatever, to Fort Lewis. It was about 9 o'clock at night. By 6 o'clock the next morning, we had our shots. We had our delousing bath and all this kind of stuff. We had our new uniforms. We'd been fed, got paid, and got everything else, and then got that warning, and then we was taken back to the airport. Then they take us to the front gate in our uniforms and stuff because we were civilians now. And we're told to go home. If you wanted to re-up, they weren't letting anybody re-up because they had too many people in the military at the time.
So did the protesters know you'd been in Vietnam when you came out that front?
Well, luckily that day, it was 6 o'clock in the morning, and I guess they were all asleep. They got bombed out from marijuana and stuff the night before. You can see the tents out there. Tacoma had a, like a U-shaped driveway, so to speak, like most of them. You can see all the tents and everything out there, and they were all just laying around in the morning dew, 6 o'clock in the morning, It was May 17th, 1971. And they were all asleep. I guess they got all bombed out of their minds the night before, little parties or whatever. And I remember we went in, I went to Northwest because Eastern didn't have a plane going to Daytona Beach, not anytime soon, but I got the Northwestern and they flew me to Atlanta, and when I got on Eastern, flew into Daytona Beach. But it was real unusual there. Well, not unusual. Well, it was for me. Nobody would look at me. Nobody would say anything to me, except some of the pilots. I guess were Air Force pilots, Navy pilots, what have you, been in maybe World War II or what have you, Korea. And but the regular people went at Tacoma, and we got to Atlanta. We got to Daytona Beach. Nobody will. I got there for my parents, and fiance arrived, and I stood there for about 40 minutes. And I saw all these people walking by, and nobody, when they see me, they divert their eyes. Nobody would say or even look at me.
Were you in uniform?
Yeah.
Still?
Mm-hmm. Sure was.
So that was their signal to avert their eyes?
I guess it was. No.
What do you make of that?
Well, at the time, I just, I shouted at Daytona Beach. I said, people, you can look at me. I said, I don't have any disease. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to bite your heads off. I said, I'm a human being. I'm an American just like the rest of you. And they wouldn't look at me. Except for this pilot. No,
even
they
after you
wouldn't.
said that?
No, they would not. They just walk right on past. I screamed, look at me. I'm a human being like anybody else. And they wouldn't. They just walked by. Except for one pilot, an older man. He come up and he said, ignore the fools. Shook my hand. He said, I was a pilot in Nam. Then he went on. Then my parents and my fiance showed up. I went home, took the uniform off, never put it back on.
So, are you proud of this service in Vietnam, or looking back at it?
Well, you know, when I came home, I had three choices. A lot of us had three choices. You can become homeless, like a lot of them did. You can go to prison, like a lot of them did. I even become a police officer, like I did. And that's how I got my frustrations out. Yeah, you wanted to fight? Oh, fight was on. You know, that type of thing. You know, and of course back then we didn't have to worry about it too much. You know, didn't have walkie-talkies back then when I first started in Daytona Beach area. And let's see, we didn't have body cameras. There wasn't anybody with cell phones like they are today and what have you. And pretty well, if an old boy didn't want to go to jail, he wanted to fight. No, the fight was on. If the ambulance took me to the hospital to get my nose fixed or whatever, well, he was next to me, you know. And basically that's how most of the police departments at that time hired Vietnam veterans, because we knew how to take orders. And that was about the time the Miranda warning was coming in, but really wasn't quite formulated like it is today and what have you. And if there was any riots, we took care of the riots. You know, worried about your rights later. We took care of the riots, stopped it. Because if you don't continue, well, people burn down the homes. See what they're doing today? The police back off. Well, people burning the towns down. You know, because this is a new strategy. Don't stop it. Let them get the frustration and their anger out. Burn the town down. Shoot the police, shoot anybody. Don't interfere. Let them burn themselves out, and then they'll go home. How stupid can you be? Back then, no, we ain't having that. We're putting a stop to it. And that's what they hired us for. Now, but then over the years, after 20 years, they finally got rid of a lot of us. Made us retire, what have you. They got the younger, gentler police department in. Except right now, I don't know what's happening.
What do you think are the residual effects of the war on you?
On me? Not trusting society. Don't trust people. Don't believe in my government. I could care less if Washington burns to the ground or what have you. You know. Politicians are liars. And you know, and I can't really imagine how stupid some people are to keep putting these professional politicians back in power, to promise you everything, give you crumbs, and then blame your failure still on somebody else. You know, but people buy it. They still vote for these idiots. They put them back in Washington or Austin or wherever. They're called professional politicians. That's all they know how to do. They couldn't function without somebody telling them when to vote for this, do that, or what have you.
You said you still see the children. Do you have some PTSD?
Well, I am surprised that my wife stayed with me all these many years. I can't tell you how many TVs I've had to replace, windshields I had to replace, fix a sheetrock in the house, replace, because back then nobody recognized PTSD. Well, we called it battle fatigue. And I didn't even know the term PTSD until I called, when I moved out here, my back was giving me problems. So I called the VA in Waco. I said, I need to have this back of mine looked at because I injured it. Well, they got the paperwork. Says, yeah, we see it, but you had to apply within 2 years after you got out. I said, what do you mean apply after 2 years? Yeah, to give you that package and everything when you got out, how to contact the VA. I said, hell, I didn't even know the VA existed until '84. I thought the VA was just an old folks home for soldiers. That's what all I thought it was. I said the only package I got was the GI Bill for school and GI Bill for home or business. That was it. And I remember this little boy on the telephone said, sir, they told everybody that you had 2 years. I said, don't call me a liar. But when I had to go to Austin, I looked him up. That's before they had all the guards and those machines and what have you. You had to walk through, metal detectors and stuff. And I walked in and found that little boy, and I went after him. And then what have you, kindly. And an old veteran stepped in and told me, yeah, he's right, man. They didn't tell these guys about the VA, just strictly education and home. Because they were processing 600 to 1,000 of us a day, they just couldn't. And those little corporals or what have you, they could probably care less themselves. They were just doing the job to go through their requirements. Some of them were drafting whatever. They really didn't care. They were just doing their job and give you this package with just the education and about how to buy a home. That's all mine consisted of. And all I had was just a DD-214 take home. That was it. Nothing else like they bring home today. They give them 2 CDs or what have you. One with their whole personnel file and one with their medical records. Well, we didn't get that stuff.
Yeah.
And now I'm trying to apply, where's my medical records? Oh, they got burned up in Kansas City back in '75, '72 and all that kind of stuff. Or Vietnam still has them. That big warehouse that they left in Cameron Bay. That's what the Department of the Army told me.
Huh.
I said, well, that's great. He said, yeah, you might want to call them. They might have them, find them for you, and send them to you. And I said, really nice.
Do we need to?
Steve, are you hearing it, Brian?
I mean, it's there, but it's not obtrusive.
Okay. Just since the vacuum cleaner started.
Ah.
Okay, so you're back in the States. Have you been to one of the things we're going to do with this project, I think, I don't know that we had this figured out before or when we came to Pampa, but we're bringing the wall that heals, a half-size replica of the Vietnam Memorial Wall to Amarillo in December. We didn't choose the date, but December is what we got. Have you been to the wall in D.C.?
No.
You sound like you have a reason for that.
I don't want to go to Washington, D.C. because I'm afraid that I would probably just lose it if I saw a congressman or senator. And I don't want to go to Washington, D.C. because there's really, to me, there's nothing there for me. Now, I did see the replica of the wall when it came to Pampa many years ago. And I finally forced myself to go see it. And I found certain names and I lost it. So I won't go see the wall again.
Just because you lost it, or
Yeah.
you try to keep all that in?
It's a part of me. My dad never forgot his experience. He had nightmares, what have you. And now I understand. It's a part of me, even my mistakes and and what have you, how I feel and things of this nature. I talk about burning down Washington, D.C., but I probably never would. And I probably wouldn't hurt a senator or nothing now. But in my younger days, I probably would have. When I come back to them, I probably would have. I'm one of those, my anger was the first part of the 35 years of my coming home. And I'm getting more mellowed out now. I never thought I'd live this long. There have been many days I put that 357 in my mouth and sucked on the barrel. But it never went off. Now I have 2 children grown and I got 3 grandkids. And the thoughts of that suicide is not quite as horrendous as it was when I came back. Psychiatrist, this smart-ass psychiatrist said, well, you got survivor guilt. Oh, no shit, Sherlock, really? Well, I'm sorry. That's what, I said, really? It took a genius or somebody with a doctorate degree to figure that out? I could have told you that. You know, but that's what they call it, survivor's guilt. And they're right. You always ask yourself, why me and not this other guy? Especially when he was standing next to you when the mortar went off and he's dead and you're not. I don't know. I have no idea why. The nightmares aren't quite as horrendous as they used to be, but they're still there. They become like old friends. If they don't show up at least once a week, I figure I'm dead. And I just kind of expect it. It's just there. It doesn't go away. I don't care what anybody tells you. If they tell us it's gone away and this and that, well, they never were in a combat situation. They might have been rare echelon type of personnel, never even saw no fighting or whatever. But the real combat soldier that's out there and saw it all, it doesn't go away. It's with me for the rest of my life. And I just learned to cope with it. All the veterans from World War II did the same thing, you know, Korea and what have you. And these guys coming back from Iraq did the same thing. You know, so that's life.
Excuse me. It seems like your generation of war veterans is trying to make sure that the same things that happened after Vietnam don't happen with the newer generation of soldiers.
Well, you can't stop it because this is the way society is. American people get bored after a while. Their attention span isn't but 2 seconds. You know, in this generation, they can't read, can't write. The schools are more worried about their grading system that the state has, get an A to a D or whatever, instead of whether Johnny can read or write. They don't teach cursive in school anymore. They don't teach history in school anymore. So we got a couple generations of failures. Now, the veterans today are all volunteers. Regardless of what anybody says, they're not ever going to be able to win that war over there because of the way society is today. Nobody expects a world war like it was in World War II, where all the countries were involved. You had two sides, you know. And regardless what happens, we get rid of Al-Qaeda, here comes ISIS. We get rid of ISIS, here comes something else. It's never going to end. You can't win this type of war. All you can do is just keep it contained in one area of the world. And this is what American people don't understand, and especially politicians don't understand. And I ain't so sure any of the generals understand that. Anybody with common sense can tell you it ain't going to end. You know, there's been people that could care less about our way of life for years, for centuries, been trying to destroy it. You know, now we've got a really committed enemy that wants to destroy it. And our own people are trying to help them. You know, so, but it's not going to end. These type of wars are never going to end now.
What would you, is there anything you would do differently about going into that war?
What, Vietnam?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea. The concept at the time was probably the correct concept to stop communism wherever you could because of the fear of domino effect, which is correct. And regardless of what anybody says, we are the policemen of the world. The people, the good people who really care for America and what have you, they see us as that. I mean, after all, with 2 wars now, we had to go help Great Britain and France. You know, and other places around the world or what have you. Saudi Arabia depends on us, what have you, to keep ISIS and the radical Islam at bay and what have you, to keep them kind of pinned up in one certain area. And regardless of what anybody says, that's what this country was founded on, depending on what your religious beliefs are and what you believe. But I happen to believe this is one reason why this country was founded, what have you. and allowed to thrive and become great at one time like it was. But nowadays, I don't think American people could really care less. As long as they got their coffee, Starbucks, and they got their little cell phones, they could care less about anything else. And got the government to pay for their marijuana or pay for their medical supplies or what have you. They could care less.
Well, I appreciate your telling your story.